We are so pleased to have back on set licensed psychotherapist Leslie Cutler for what we call Mindful Moments.
Thank you, Julie. It's wonderful to be here.
Welcome back.
Thank you.
For the numerous time.
Yes.
We're going to talk today about reclaiming your voice, which is a very interesting and very topical conversation. So what brought you to this subject matter today?
You know, this is something that's been on my mind a bit lately, especially with the Me Too movement. We're seeing so many people come forward with their truth, a truth that they've held deep inside for so long. So I really became interested in this, wondering, you know, why is it that people kind of stuff their voice? Why is it that people do not come forward sooner? So I wanted to look at that a little bit today, as well as offering 5 different ways to kind of find your voice, to reclaim your truth, to find your voice once again.
Can I ask you, is finding your truth, does it necessarily have to do with something that has happened to you or an event that's happened? Or is it also kind of a philosophy of how you just deal with life and what happens in life?
I think it could apply to either one. I mean, truth is either objective or subjective. And I think, Julie, if there was some sort of horrible car accident, God forbid, out front, and you and I both witnessed it, and the police came to us and asked for our story, we would each have a different story to tell. Even though both of our stories would be correct, I might notice the red car, you might notice the blue car, and this and that. And so we both would bring it based upon our experiences and the lens by which we see the world.
Exactly.
But you know, what I think happens so often is sometime in our early childhood, we are taught to silence our voice. You know, my dad used to say, children are to be seen and not heard. And you know, and I think with our generation, our parents were raised that way as well.
Sure.
So very early on, the message gets sent to us that, listen, hey, quiet down on the questions, you know, tone it down a little bit. I heard that a lot. Tone it down, you know, take it back a few notches. And you know, and it was stifling. So after a while, you learn to withhold. You stuff down those things. You go through life very tight-lipped. And this withholding gets passed from generation to generation. And even in the case where you have parents that are very kind, caring, and open, they themselves still withhold. And we as children were mimickers. We watched our parents, and that became our normal. So without even realizing it, we wind up doing that ourselves. And when our truth gets withheld for that long, we start to question it.
So there's ways to help offset this.
Right, so exactly. So today I wanted to talk about 5 different ways that we can really start living and telling our truth, because this is truly the only way to live a happy life.
Okay, so the first one is notice in what circumstances you tend to withhold your truth.
Right, and this is step 1. And it's like anything that you want to work on. It's like there's a certain mindfulness that needs to come to the surface. You know, perhaps there are certain people in your life that you say, it's interesting, every time I'm with that person, I tend to sugarcoat the truth, dance around the block a little bit before going directly to what it is that I need to say. And what is it about this relationship that's triggering me? Do they remind you of somebody in the past who's controlled you, or maybe that teacher that was, you know, horrible to you in the 4th grade? But it's important to make that connection and to realize, okay, this is going to be the person where I'm going to be challenged.
So you consciously need to identify that.
So
to yourself.
First is to identify that, as in all things. And so again, awareness is everything. Number 2 is really giving yourself permission to take your time, build your courage to get clear. And you know, I tell my clients this all the time. It's important to first note it, like, oh dear, in that meeting I should have said this, but I didn't. But it doesn't mean that it can't be revisited later. Sometimes you need to step back and sit with it for a little while, remove the emotional component and say, okay, how does this settle with me? What is it that I need to say in this moment? So, you know, take the time you need to step away if necessary.
And do you also kind of try to learn how to present whatever it is you're going to present, in what form you present it?
Yes, and we will get to that moving forward.
Okay, excellent. Trust that the truth shall set you free.
Well, this is kind of a universal
Bumper
tenet.
sticker, yep.
Yeah, and I think Paul said it in the New Testament, and there's various yogis that have said it
sure.
throughout time, and it is so true. I truly believe that the truth also always comes to the surface.
Yep.
And it might take decades for that to happen, but that does happen. And I always say, truth cuts through illusion. It's that sword that kind of divides all of the muck and brings us to that level of clarity. It's frequently the road less traveled, but it is the thing that supplies the answers to all.
Right. Now, on the truth shall set you free, I notice I have a lot of friends who've had relationships that have broken up, or divorces, or just things that haven't worked out. And for a long time, you end up viewing everything from your perspective. And it seems that as time and as things go on, you end up saying, well, there's always two sides to every story.
Right.
And maybe I could have done something a little different.
Yes. And I see that especially in the case of infidelity in relationships, where the person feels so victimized that it's very, very difficult for them to kind of step back from that level of betrayal and say, wait a second, there are things in here for me to learn as well.
Exactly.
Yeah, and sometimes that might take a little bit of time for, kind of removing that emotional component and then having that clarity.
But then you really do have the clarity of the absolute truth.
Yes.
Where you can see it from both sides.
And then it requires a certain level of ownership, taking it to the next step so that those patterns are therefore not repeated and carried forward.
Exactly.
Number 4 is having no attachment to how the truth is received. And this is tough.
Now, what does that mean? Paraphrase that.
Well, in other words, listen, it might not go over very well.
Okay.
And sometimes the truth is kind of dirty and people don't want to deal with it. It's messy, and it might not be, I think about some of these people that have spoken lately about, sexual abuse histories. And for them, the most important part in their healing has been saying and speaking their truth and letting their truth be known.
Sure.
Not necessarily what the final outcome is of what the ultimate punishment is for the person that victimized them.
Yep.
And that's where the courage needs to take place. So before going in to speak, kind of find your center, taking those deep breaths, get grounded, and release the whole idea of any attachment to what the final outcome will be.
Right. Should you practice if you're going to be doing something that's really going to be difficult for you to get it out there? Do you practice in your head or in your heart, and then if this happens, then I'll react this way. If they react this way, then I'll react this way. Or do you just let it happen as it happens?
I don't know. I'm such a proponent of being authentic and real. Yeah. Maybe the one thing that can be practiced is, what am I not going to say because it will not help the situation? Is let me review those things that just aren't necessary.
Yeah, I can leave these facts out.
I can leave these facts out.
It's not going to help.
Yes.
Okay. And the 5th is wrap your truth in love. Ha.
So prior to working as a psychotherapist, I spent about 12 or 13 years working in design.
Yep.
And anytime a new product came to market, it would start in the engineering department, where the ideas and the content, so to speak, would be built and developed. It would then go to us, marketing, packaging, development. We were the ones that made it pretty. You wouldn't buy a bottle of perfume in an old mason jar, nor would you buy a bag of cereal in a garbage bag.
Right.
So,
why not?
Right. So people do look at a book by its cover and make judgments and that sort of thing. So the content of what we speak to people is what happens in the engineering department. What happens in the creative development is the delivery, and the delivery should always be wrapped in love. And when I talk to clients about this, it was like what we were saying. It's like, what is not necessary to say?
Right.
How can we deliver this to the person we love and care about, where we're being true to ourselves but yet honoring who it is that they are?
Right.
And that is the absolute ultimate challenge.
Sure. And what if the truth that you're telling is going to have a negative or deleterious effect on the person you're saying it to, but it needs to be said?
And that's the challenge too. In order to have any type of authentic relationship with anybody, sometimes you need to deliver, somewhat critical information. But again, it's about how it's said, how it's wrapped, and therefore it will hopefully be received in a way that's much more promising.
And it might take a while for that person who's receiving it to really understand.
To truly understand.
And sometimes that's okay. Sometimes people need time.
Yeah, but as long as we're withholding truth, then we're not being honest, and it doesn't allow us to have those deep level relationships that we truly crave and desire. It is a challenge, but there is this child in us that was silenced for so long and looking to be free.
Yep. Excellent topic. Thank you. What wonderful points.
Thank you so much.
Yes, we'll have you again for more wisdom
Thank
and
you.
mindful moments.
Thank you, Julie.
Thank you, Leslie.